We're going to get started with the talk here in just a moment now that we've got the projector issues figured out. A couple announcements. Nathan Voss, if you're in here.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? No? How about now? Is that better? No? How about now? Excellent. Okay, so before I get started, how many people here saw the presentation that Carsten and I gave at CCC in Berlin? Oh, that's good. Not too many people, because this is a completely different presentation. So, all right. So, what are we going to be talking about? Essentially, the talk that we gave at CCC was primarily focused on the A51 rainbow tables. This talk is going to be a much more comprehensive overview of GSM security. I'm going to explain some of the overview of some of the architecture of GSM, some of the crypto that lives in it, and as I'm explaining it, I'm going to explain some of the flaws in GSM as we go through. So I'm also going to be releasing a live CD called OpenBootTS. This is essentially a GSM base station in a box. It has lots of neat capabilities. And I've actually got a virtual machine that's running the OpenBootTS code now. So if you want to connect to my GSM base station here, feel free. You'll need a quad band phone, because I'm running in the ISM band here. I've also got no antennas connected, so people at the back of the room probably won't even be able to see the BTS. But feel free to do a scan for it, connect to it. You'll need to, when you connect to it, it'll send you a little text message saying, please reply with your phone number. If you reply with your 10-digit phone number, it'll authorize you onto Asterisk. And I've got voice over IP backhaul, so you can try making calls, and just generally feel free to play with it. It's right there. You have my word that there's nothing malicious going on with it. It's just a demonstration of functionality.
Where's the source code?
SourceForge.
You got me. I turned off my phone.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, how often do people ask you to make calls during their presentation? Okay, so starting from the top, let's talk about some of the basic identifiers in GSM. The first and most obvious that most people know about is the IMEI, the International Mobile Equipment Identifier. This is a number that identifies a handset. It's relatively easy to change your IMEI, and it's completely illegal to do so. You can actually buy cell phones that will change their IMEI on every call. So quite why you'd want one, I don't know. But the idea of an IMEI is that if the phone gets stolen, you can report it to your network operator, and they'll disable the phone, which is why it's illegal to change it, because you can then use stolen phones. The IMSI is the subscriber identifier. It's kind of a secret, kind of not a secret. We'll come back to what that means. The point of an IMSI is that it identifies a billing account. So that is your T-Mobile or your AT&T subscriber identifier stored in your SIM card. The TIMSI is a temporary mobile subscriber identity. The idea is that when you first connect to the network, you authorize yourself with your IMSI, and then the network assigns you a TIMSI that you use from then on to prevent the IMSI being transmitted too often. There is a problem with that in that the BTS can actually ask for your IMSI at any time. So this whole mechanism of authorizing yourself with your IMSI and then getting allocated a TIMSI is kind of pointless, because at any point the BTS can say, hey, what's your IMSI? That does actually require you to be connected to my BTS. So in order for me to get your IMSI, you have to connect to my BTS. Let's talk about how that happens. So when a GSM handset turns on, it looks at a thing called a beacon channel, where the base stations in the area advertise themselves. And they advertise primarily two numbers, a mobile country code and a mobile network code. MCC for the US is 310 to 316. There's a full list of MNCs and MCCs on Wikipedia. Now, the idea of an MNC and MCC is to identify a network, but it actually doesn't authenticate anything. So if I configured my BTS here with an MNC MCC of 310-260, instead of everyone in the room having to scan for my BTS and look for it and manually connect to it, anyone who's on T-Mobile would just go, hey, there's a T-Mobile base station here. Nice strong signal, I'll connect to that. It's really that simple. It's that dumb. You 2 3-digit numbers, which are publicly listed on Wikipedia, you type these into your base station and all of the handsets in the area connect to you. It's really that stupid. If you claim it, they will come. They really will. The handsets will just connect to whichever tower in the area claims the right MNC MCC and has the strongest signal. So this particular attack is a very well-known attack. It's called an IMSI catcher, largely because the first thing that happens when you connect to my BTS is my BTS will request your IMSI, which I shouldn't ever see, so it's an IMSI catcher. How do you actually build an IMSI catcher like this? Well, it's not tremendously difficult. You start out with a USRP. That gives you your radio hardware. Software called OpenBTS provides the GSM stack, and then asterisk to connect all of the GSM interface calls to voice over IP backhaul. The standard clock on the USRP runs at 64 megahertz, and it's actually got too much clock drift in it to be useful in GSM. It's accurate to about 20 parts per million, and the GSM spec requires the clock to be accurate to less than half a part per million. So that's 500 hertz of accuracy at 900 megahertz. That's how stable GSM clocks have to be. So you have to modify your USRP with a high stability clock, or handsets won't be able to camp to it. It's a relatively easy soldering job. All the parts are publicly available. The software side is not tremendously difficult. It's standard GNU build chains, configure, make, install. The only real difficulty with it is library versions. OpenBTS has various components that have to be compiled separately, and they can be very picky about libraries. So once you've got your software all installed, you pick your MNC and your MCC, you find an open channel. Sorry, ARFCON in GSM. For some reason, ETSI, the organization that writes the specifications for GSM, they don't like using the same terminology as the rest of the world. So in GSM, you don't have channels. You have ARFCNs. Don't ask me why. It's just the way that they do it. So you pick a free channel, you set your MNC and MCC, and you wait. That's all there is to it, running an IMSI catcher. If you want to actually capture calls, then you'd probably want to run Wireshark on your IP backhaul, because it has a built-in SIP analyzer, so you can just say, hey, show me all the voice over IP calls. It's pretty slick. So OpenBTS, if the thought of compiling OpenBTS from source is just too much for you, then this is what's going to help you out. The idea of OpenBTS is it's a set of scripts for Debian Live that produce a bootable CD image. So the idea is it's you download the tarball, and you run the first stage, and it will download GNU Radio and OpenBTS and various libraries, and it will set up an environment on your hard drive for producing an ISO image. Once you've done that preparatory stage, you can actually make modifications to that image before you burn it. You get a full file system. You even get cherooted into it as part of the build process. And you can customize it any way that you like. So the image that I'm using here, I've preloaded it with my asterisk configuration, with my OpenBTS configuration, with my SMS manager configuration. I'm using VMware to run it at the moment, but you can use virtual consoles. I have an init tab that runs all the various components of the system on virtual consoles. It's pretty sophisticated. You can customize it to any level that you wish, any amount of configuration that you want to put in there. You can even generate different image types with it, so you don't necessarily need to commit it to an ISO for a bootable CD. You can just as easily burn it to a USB image that once you DD it onto a USB key, you've got a bootable USB key. You can produce PXE boot images with it, so you can boot your BTSs over the network. All of this, it's designed for all of this configuration to be done before you burn the ISO, so that when you put the ISO in the machine and you boot it up, it all comes straight up and it's all ready and working and there. So, quick demo of OpenBootTS. This is my virtual machine here. Let me just show you this. So you can see, well, maybe you can't see. One thing that's notably missing from my VM configuration here is a hard drive. So this virtual machine is booted from the CD. And then, okay. Okay, so my screen is too low resolution here, but I've got, this is Asterisk. So you'll see if people are making calls, authenticating to the network, you'll see all the Asterisk traffic scrolling past here. And then I've got the SMS queue manager, so all of the messages that are coming back and forth as people are registering, they're all going through here. And then the fun one is OpenBTS itself. And there's a whole bunch of people connected to the BTS at the moment. So these are the IMSIs of everyone that's connected to my cell right now. Quite a few of them, so thank you for playing along. Just to show you as well the Wireshark, if you go to statistics for voice over IP calls, oh, there's one call. You can pull up the player, decode it, and there's actually no audio on this. It would show you the waveform if there was actually any audio. I suspect that was just someone's phone ringing. But you can see if there had been calls made, you'd get the two audio streams for each side of the conversation. And it's just standard SIP. It's standard voice over IP. So you can put any SIP proxies that you want in there. You can modify it. And obviously, it's my Asterisk server. So if I wanted to route all of your calls to 911, then I can just tweak my Asterisk config like that relatively easily. So it does work. No one's making calls, and I can't say I blame you for that. But yeah, you can, yeah, so here you can see all of my Asterisk traffic scrolling by. Asterisk works as both the hardware location registry and the voice over IP connectivity in OpenBTS. So it'll authorize people onto the network as well as actually connecting their calls on the back end. So I'll leave that churning away, and you can feel free to play with it. So the future for OpenBootTS, at the moment, it's fairly bare bones. It's just OpenBTS. What I'd like to do, once I can get my hands on some hardware, is have it support OpenBSC as well, which is the other open source GSM stack. Instead of using the USRP, though, it uses an actual micro BTS. So two very different packages. And what I'd like to eventually get OpenBootTS into is effectively a backtrack for GSM. There's a lot of different tools out there, a lot of software with a lot of different capabilities in GSM, and what I'm aiming for OpenBootTS to end up as is a single repository for a live CD with a complete toolkit for GSM. So if you've got any suggestions for features to add to it, maybe packages that you want me to add to the distribution, or bits of software that you want me to add, it's all good.
There's a phone call on right now if you want to play that.
Oh, there is? There we go. Oh, wrong button. Yeah, interesting that you say the connection's kind of bad. I'm not actually connected to the Shmoocon Wi-Fi here. You'll like this. I've actually had significant problems in the past connecting SIP calls from behind NAT. And it's pretty common for networks to just not support SIP. The only reliable way I've ever found of getting a connection that will allow me to do voice over IP is to tether to my G1. So So if you're making calls on this BTS, it's coming from your cell phone to my BTS over GSM. It's going over USB, going through all of the NAT in VMware, going over Wi-Fi to my cell phone, which then takes it through 3G out to T-Mobile and out to my SIP provider on the internet. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, in the style of Dan Kaminsky, I guess you could say I'm tunneling GSM over GSM. So you can see there's calls popping up. I'm going to try and decode one of these. I'm not used to working at such low resolution. No, it's not going to play the game. We'll come back to that. So yeah, that's OpenBootTS. It's essentially a GSM base station in a box. You just give it hardware, give it configuration, and you can take it from there. So assuming that you've booted up your base station and you don't want to run an IMSI catcher, because obviously IMSI catchers are illegal. We don't want to be doing anything illegal. So you want to run a test network. Well, the first thing that you want to do is set your MNC and your MCC to 001, 001. These are GSM test values, so it's a test country with a test network, and phones should not connect to it by default. The other thing that you'll want to do is reduce your output power. You'll see I've got no antennas on here, so if phones find base stations by camping to the strongest signal, if you make your signal deliberately weak, phones shouldn't camp to you. It's fairly logical. The third thing that I'm doing here as well is using a GSM 900 frequency. So this is a European GSM frequency that over here overlaps the ISM band. So I'm not using a GSM band here, which is why a standard single band or dual band US cell phone will not be able to see the BTS. You need a quad band phone because I'm operating in GSM 900, which is the ISM band over here. So the problem with this is that despite all of these protections, we've seen iPhones that still kind of beat their heads against us, begging us to hack them. We took all of these precautions, we figured out all of these steps, and a few more as well, to try and deter this iPhone from connecting to us during testing, and we could not shake it. We dropped our output power, we removed our antennas, we changed our MNC and MCC, everything that we could possibly do to prevent people from connecting to us accidentally, and this iPhone would not leave us alone. We don't know what the specific details of that problem were, but I've actually been told that since then, I've found out that apparently during the manufacturing process for the iPhone, one of the final stages of the process is they put it onto a BTS with an MNC and MCC of 001, 001 in order to test the bit error rate of the radio. The problem with that is that if they then don't clear the baseband correctly, that test MNC, MCC will end up as a stored preferred network by the baseband. So what we suspect is that something went wrong in the manufacturing process of that iPhone, and that test MNC, MCC ended up as a preferred network, which is kind of scary if you think about it, given that this is supposed to be never seen in practice, and this particular iPhone just, like I said, it would not leave us alone. A couple of bugs in OpenBTS that we've seen that are kind of fun. One of the things that you get to configure in OpenBTS is your network short name. So anyone who's connected to the network will see it comes up as test sim. You can set that to be anything you like. There was a student in China who set up a very similar setup to this, but instead of using a test MNC and MCC, he used the MNC MCC of China Telecom. And of course, all of the China Telecom handsets in the area connected to his BTS and started showing OpenBTS as their network name. His classmates got a little upset at this, so he took down the BTS. All the handsets camped back to China Telecom and still said OpenBTS as the network name. Hard reboots later, the BTS was long gone. The phones had been hard rebooted, had the batteries and SIM cards pulled. They still showed OpenBTS as the preferred network name. As far as I know, he's never found a way to fix that. Open and closed registration. So I mentioned that the text message that you send goes through to the asterisk config, and it adds your IMSI to the asterisk config. That's actually the second level of access control on the system. The first one is when your phone initially connects to the base station. The base station has the option of rejecting you or accepting you based on your IMEI and your IMSI. One of the previous versions of OpenBTS had a bug in that when you turned off open registration, which allows everyone to connect, the message that it sent back when it was connected to by a phone that it didn't want, instead of sending the "you're not authorized to connect to this network" message, by mistake it sent the "you've been stolen, please turn yourself off" message. In the case of iPhones, if they receive this message, it's a hard reboot to clear it. I don't know how many people have ever tried taking the battery out of an iPhone. Other handsets will actually disable themselves permanently, because this is a GSM protection to try and prevent the use of stolen handsets. So as far as the handset's concerned, the network is telling it that it's been stolen and it needs to disable itself. So it could well end up as a completely permanent DOS against the handset. So we've not talked about any crypto in GSM yet. Nothing at all. We've not touched on crypto yet. And we've already got some pretty good attacks here. We've got IMSI-TIMSI secrecy being broken, if I can trick you into connecting to my BTS. We've got an unintentional DOS where we accidentally entice users to connect to our BTS even though we don't want them. It's kind of hard to avoid that DOS. We've got an unintentional semi-permanent DOS where we can just disable phones as and when we wish. And all we need to do is spoof 6 digits of MNC and MCC for a man-in-the-middle attack against GSM. So without even touching on any of the GSM crypto, we've already got some pretty significant attacks against GSM here. And this was the point at which we started thinking, wow, this is kind of shocking. We were quite surprised by this level of vulnerability in a protocol like GSM. So let's talk about the crypto then. Let's get onto that. Some of the basic primitives in the GSM crypto scheme. There's 2 main inputs. There's a nonce called RAND. This is sent from the base station to the handset during the initial authentication. It's a challenge response mechanism, and this random value is the only challenge. There is no client-side challenge at all. KI is the secret key. If you think of your IMSI as effectively your username, then KI is your password. It's a 128-bit secret stored in your SIM. It shouldn't ever leave the SIM. Outputs from the crypto scheme, case C is your session key. This is the key that's actually used to cipher your traffic in both directions. It's a mutually agreed secret based on KI that is used to key the A5 cipher. And then SRES is a session response. So the idea is it's a little chunk of data that's sent from the handset back to the base station as proof that you know the secret. In terms of algorithms, there's 3 primary algorithms, A3, A5, and A8. You shouldn't think of these as algorithms. This is more like algorithm algebra. A3, A5, A8 don't refer to specific functions. They refer to a class of functions with specific characteristics. So A3 and A8, for example, are hash functions. They're normally implemented as one single hash function. So you'll see people talking about A3, A8 as one function. A5 is the cipher that's used, and again, there's multiple variations of that. How are these things actually put together? Well, let's talk about the process of actually camping to a base station. So your handset turns on, searches the beacon channel for an MNC MCC it wants to connect to, finds an appropriate BTS. It sends its TIMSI to the BTS. The BTS at that point can request its IMSI, or it can authenticate based on the TIMSI as it wishes. And the first thing that the base station does is send this random nonce to the handset. Now, I mentioned this is the only source of entropy in the authentication of GSM. There is no client challenge, meaning that any vulnerabilities that are exposed as a result of the BTS owner, that would be me, having control of these random nonces, there's nothing you can do to prevent them. Once the handset receives this random nonce, it passes it along to the SIM, usually over a clear text channel. So one of the popular methods for unlocking an iPhone is actually a shim that you put between your SIM card and your phone, and it proxies the requests between the two. Now, the idea of this is that the early versions of the iPhone firmware, the iPhone baseband firmware rather, they actually queried the SIM card multiple times for the IMSI and only used one of those responses to determine if you were SIM locked. So all they did was they proxy all of these requests and modify them as they see fit, except for the one that gets checked, and that's the one that gets passed through unmodified. So it's totally possible to man in the middle between your phone and your SIM and do that for whatever you want to do. The SIM takes this random nonce, concatenates it with the secret key, and hashes it. Typically, A3 and A8 are implemented as one function. So it'll run one hash function over this blob of binary, and then it splits the output into two. The first part of the output becomes the session key. The second part of the output becomes the session response. So by taking that hash and splitting it into two, you can prove that you know KI by sending the session response, as well as establishing a secret for your A5 cipher. So that's the basic authentication scheme. BTS sends a random nonce to the mobile station, which passes it along to the SIM. The SIM concatenates that nonce with its secret key, hashes the result, passes the result back to the handset, which then splits it into the session response and the ciphering key. So how does this work with an IMSI catcher? Because if you think about it, I don't know any of your KIs. I don't know any of your secret keys, yet you're able to connect to my BTS. How does that work? Well, if I don't know KI, then it doesn't really matter what random challenge I send to you, because I don't know what the KC is going to be. I don't know what that key is going to be. So regardless of what random nonce I send you, I can't decrypt the result. Fortunately, there's the A5 ciphers that I mentioned. There's 4 variants of it that you can request from the BTS, of which A50 is a null cipher, effectively plain text. So all that happens is when you connect to my BTS says, hey, I don't know who you are, I don't know who your secret key is, let's just talk in plain text. And your phones will just go, yeah, okay. They really will just go, okay. There's a section, the GSM specifications are very long, very wordy, and very unreadable. There's one particular part of the specification, though, that says that whenever a connection is in place which is or becomes unenciphered, an indication shall be given to the user. So if you go and look up A51 on Wikipedia, you'll actually see a screenshot of a Nokia phone saying, warning, ciphering not provided by operator. I can pretty much guarantee that nobody in this room has ever actually seen this alert in reality. Because, you have? Excellent, someone has, awesome, that's a first. The reason why you'll very rarely see this, I won't say never anymore, is because there is a bit in the configuration that's stored in your SIM card that if the mobile network operator sets that bit, it'll disable the alert from being displayed. So rather than thinking that you've never seen this plain text alert on your phone, don't think that that's because you've never connected to a network that doesn't use ciphering. I guarantee you that you've probably connected to a network that does disable ciphering. The only problem is that your mobile network operator, your service provider, has disabled that alert to tell you about it. Kind of fun.
Why do they do that?
Because it's simpler, essentially. If you get a configuration problem with a BTS, let's say that the base station loses the ability to query the hardware location registry for what session key should be generated for a particular challenge. it's a lot easier to just disable ciphering and allow people to continue making calls, rather than disabling the cell completely while you figure out the problem. So it's done for simplicity, effectively.
Less tech support calls.
Yes, less tech support calls, indeed. So let's talk about A3 and A8. These are the hash functions that are stored in the SIM card. They're generally implemented as one hash function with the response being split in two. The first version of A3A8 is called comp128. In 1998, yes, 12 years ago, this was reverse engineered and published and completely broken to the point where you can recover the secret key and effectively clone the phone by sending it 150,000 chosen challenges. It's actually a collision in one particular round of the comp128 function. There's subsequent work been done. The initial 150,000 challenges was for what's called a 2R differential attack against each byte of the secret key. Subsequent work has extended that to 3R, 4R, 5R attacks and reduced it from 150,000 challenges to 80,000 challenges. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't regard a 128-bit hash function as secure if I can disclose the secret key with just 80,000 challenges, 80,000 chosen challenges. It's totally broken. Unfortunately, lots of mobile network operators still use it. They don't seem to care that SIMs can be cloned. They don't seem to care that there's no real security here. It's what they use, so it's what they're going to continue to use. Their response to these cloning attacks was to make the SIM cards self-destruct after 64,000 challenges. So instead of actually deploying a secure hash function, deploying something that has some semblance of security, they just cut the SIM card off just before you get enough challenges to actually recover the secret key. So that's not much of a defense. Comp128 has been subsequently patched. There's version 2 and version 3. Neither one has ever been publicly disclosed or publicly cryptanalyzed. We do know that they're very similar to the Comp128 version 1, so they probably suffer from the very same or very similar vulnerabilities. But the simple reality is that there's lots of different A3A8 functions in use. As it turns out, Comp128, the whole family of Comp128 functions has been, because the version 1 function was broken so badly, the whole family isn't trusted by MNOs generally. So although some MNOs do still use Comp128, a lot of them end up rolling their own hash functions. And we all know how well that turns out. So there's all kinds of functions out there. There's all kinds of hashes in use. Who knows what kinds of bugs are lurking? If you can find a way to figure out what hash function is being used by your mobile network operator of choice, chances are there's going to be a break in it somewhere. The attack against V1 is very well known. This link is for one example of a V1 SIM cloner. This will work with the Lady Ada's serial SIM card readers. Clones a V1 SIM card in about 8 hours. None of these tools, none of these Comp128 cracking tools are open source. I've not seen an open source one yet. I have seen lots and lots and lots of people saying, hey, I've just broken Comp128 version 2. Here's my binary. Please ignore all the rootkits and malware and downloaders and droppers. And so if you do want to try cloning your SIM, it's relatively easy to find code to do so, but please be careful. They're riddled with malware. Run it in VMware, and then just restore the image when you're done. So yeah, the hash function in the SIM, there's one that's been analyzed and broken. There's 2 more that have never been analyzed, and there's a whole bunch that nobody really knows what's going on. Not a particularly great situation as compared to public discourse on what hash function to use. So let's talk about ciphers now. A5. A5 is used to encrypt your traffic. Now, depending on what kind of traffic you're sending, you could get a different variant of A5. The three known variants of A5, A5.1 is the most common variant. This is the original European A5 cipher. A5.2 is a weakened version of A5.1 that was designed for export. Very, very similar. It's a very similar design of cipher. It uses 3 irregularly clocked linear feedback shift registers, but slightly different construction. A5.3 is a completely different cipher, totally different. Instead of being an LFSR-based stream cipher, it's a block cipher. It's a block cipher. The point of it is that when you connect to my BTS, I get to tell you what A5 variant we're going to use. You have no input into this decision whatsoever. It's not like you can reject what I'm offering you. Either you accept the cipher that I'm offering or you don't connect to my BTS. It's as simple as that. How do you attack these functions? Well, A5.2 is deliberately weakened. The year after the Comp128 break was published, A5.2 was broken. It was broken so badly that from a few seconds of recorded GSM conversation, you can actually recover the session key from the ciphertext. It's about as bad as crypto breaks get. So assuming that we own the BTS, so you're all connected to my base station here. I get to choose which A5 variant we're going to talk, and I get to choose the random nonce that I use to authenticate you. So what I can do is, I can wait until you're on AT&T, and I can sniff your conversation on AT&T. We'll come back to the frequency hopping aspect of that. But the point is, I can sniff and record your conversation, and I can recover that random nonce. It's sent in plain text. It's not supposed to be secret. Then when you connect to my BTS, I can negotiate A5.2 with you and replay that same random nonce, which means that once you've started ciphering with A5.2 with the same session key, I can then break A5.2, recover the session key for that random nonce, and apply that session key to my recorded conversation from earlier. Which means that, effectively, I can record your conversations and then trick you into connecting to my BTS and decrypt all of your traffic, regardless of which A5 variant you're talking on your legitimate network. Hold it, yeah. It gets better. One of the main defenses that's been proposed against this sniffing and replay attack is frequency hopping. There's a couple of problems with the frequency hopping implementation, not least of which is that the BTSs get to choose whether they tell you the frequency hopping sequence in plain text or in ciphertext. And a lot of them will actually tell you the frequency hopping sequence in plain text before they've established the ciphering. So you can just follow along with the frequency hopping. Alternatively, and this is the really fun one, the USRP2 actually has oodles of bandwidth in it, so much so that it's feasible to record the entire GSM band for a given network operator. So you just say, right, AT&T, they're using this band from this frequency to this frequency. You record the whole thing, dump the whole band over gigabit Ethernet, stream it to hard drive, and record it later. So once you've broken the A5 key and you've recovered that random nonce, once you've recovered the random nonce and you've broken that A5 key, you can then figure out the frequency hopping sequence from your recordings if you want to. So the frequency hopping is not a defense at all. The sequence is sometimes sent in plain text, and even if it's not, you can just grab the whole band and just dump the whole band to disk. It's really good fun. There is not even a pretense of forward secrecy in GSM. If I can record any of your calls at any time later that I get hold of your secret key, or even just the session key that was used to encrypt that conversation, I can decrypt your traffic. It's not like SSL where you can negotiate an ephemeral key in the middle of the protocol that means that later on, if I recover the secret key, I can't decrypt your SSL traffic. There's nothing like that in GSM. There is no forward secrecy. So A5.1 and A5.3, we talked about A5.2. A5.1 is a 64-bit stream cipher which uses a 54-bit key. The way that they do this is just by zeroing out 10 of the bits. If that's not a deliberate act to weaken the security of A51, I don't know what is. Why you would ever take 64 bits of key material and zero out 10 of the bits before passing it to a 64-bit stream cipher, I don't know. Even if those 10 bits weren't zeroed out, it's still just a 64-bit cipher. So it's viable to produce rainbow tables against A51 in its native form. This is what Carsten and I released at CCC, is the rainbow tables for A51 in its native form. There are various cryptanalytical attacks against A51 as well that allow you to compensate with various time memory trade-offs for various characteristics. Given that it's a 54-bit cipher, you don't really need to worry about it. And you can, the rainbow tables that we released at CCC are for just straight A51. We're not doing any cryptanalysis of it. There's nothing special about it. It's just straight A51. A53 is the most secure of the GSM ciphers. There have been attacks disclosed against A53. They're not viable against 3G systems because they require too much known plain text. The attacks against A53 so far are related key attacks. They just don't work with the 3G crypto scheme. The interesting thing about it, though, is that A53 was based on another cipher called Misty. A53 is called Kasumi. And the attacks against Kasumi don't work against Misty. So once again, they took a function and they weakened it for use in GSM. Whether it was done deliberately or not, I don't know, but the end result is that there is a cryptanalytical result against Kasumi that does not apply to Misty. So it's a weakening of that ciphering function. So we've got a few attacks on the crypto side as well. We've got no client challenge, so we've only got one random nonce in there, so we're vulnerable to replay attacks. We've got a 54-bit session key, which is just too small in the modern day and age. SIM cards are vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attacks. We can negotiate null crypto. In fact, we're actively encouraged to negotiate null crypto by the fact that your network operator will disable the warning alerting you that you're on null crypto. Hash functions, Comp128 version 1 has been badly broken and is still being used. There's all kinds of secret hash functions in use. There's all kinds of secret ciphering functions in use. All of this that I've talked about so far is against basic GSM. There's all kinds of extra ciphers used in GPRS and Edge and 3G that have, again, never been disclosed, never been cryptanalyzed. There's a lot of secrecy still remaining in GSM. Out of the functions that have been disclosed, A51 is pretty broken. A52 is horrifically broken. A53 is academically broken. So what are you left with? You've got the opportunity to replay these random nonces and crack the A52 key to break forward secrecy. There's a lot of cryptographic attacks against GSM. Seriously? Is it this bad? Yes, it really is. There is no security in GSM at all. It's not secure. What have we not talked about here? Well, if you think about it, I've just got a base station here, and I've got my own network and my own kind of asterisk and voice over IP backhaul and all the rest of it. When you consider a legitimate cell network, there's, again, all kinds of infrastructure behind that cell tower. You've got the base station controller, you've got the master system controller, you've got the hardware location registry, all of these different components and many more. They're all interconnected using a protocol known as SS7, Signaling System 7. SS7 is actually just as broken as GSM. It really is. It has some fabulously stupid flaws in it. So if you combine the two, and you combine kind of GSM hackery on the front end with SS7 hackery on the back end, you can have a lot of fun. I'm not going to talk about it in too much detail. I'm just going to pimp Nick and Don's talk. This is their research on SS7 and GSM. Highly recommend it. They're doing some great stuff. If you're going to Boston Source, I recommend going to the talk. That's all from me. Questions? Yes. Question down here?
Yeah, how does LTE stand?
How does LTE stand? To be honest, all of the stuff that I've talked about here is just GSM. 3G technologies, 3G is a significant overhaul of the GSM architecture. It does add client challenges. It does add network-to-handset authentication. There's all kinds of stuff changed. 3G is much better. Even 2.5 and 2.75G, so GPRS and Edge, are much better than basic GSM. Basic GSM is horrific, and the later protocols have tried to improve it somewhat with varying degrees of success. Yes?
What color code are you using in USRP?
I'm using a pair of RFX 900s with a 52 megahertz external clock. Yes? My favorite, most secure, I would... I was asked to pick my favorite, most secure cellular protocol. I've actually had this conversation with several people. I know a few folks who are like, oh, CDMA is great because you can't talk it. The thing about CDMA is that it's a very different modulation scheme that's very, very difficult to implement in software. So it's more secure by being more obscure. Exactly. So my own personal preference would probably be for a 3G technology. They are, but they're the best that's out there at the moment. It is. It is very sad. Yes? So the question was, is there anything to stop me from using 2 USRPs and proxying an entire call? The only thing that stops us from doing that at the moment is that there does not currently exist an open source software radio implementation of a mobile station. So yes, in theory, you can do that, but it would take a little bit of work to take the modulation schemes out of OpenBTS and effectively implement an entire new protocol stack for the mobile station. Okay, any more questions? Yes, one over here.
Is there a way to modify the hardware on a phone to, if it's originally a GSM and with CDMA or vice versa?
No. GSM and CDMA use wildly different modulation schemes. They're completely incompatible. There's really very little overlap between the two. You would really need a phone with 2 baseband chips. Some BlackBerries have both GSM and CDMA functionality. I've not come across a software implementation that can switch between them. Yes, question?
Is it a function of your implementation that requires you to send a text message to register your phone number?
Yes, it is. So, okay, so the question was, is it a function of my implementation that requires me to send that text message and engage in that dialogue to register? Yes, it is. This is actually the software stack that was used at Burning Man. So it's designed to be accessible and be relatively friendly to people. It's entirely possible to modify my setup, just to modify the SMS queue manager, such that the moment someone connects to the BTS, they automatically get added to asterisk and assigned a cellular number. So you don't necessarily need that SMS conversation. Question in the back. Yes, the replay does work against A53. If you can replay RAND and then crack the A52 session key, that session key will be the same regardless of which A5 variant was negotiated. So as long as that random nonce is the same, you will always get the same session key for A5 1, 2, or 3, which is the great fun of it, that you can use that A52 break to get into a much more secure algorithm. Yes? So the question was, do I foresee some big public event that's going to force MNOs to wake up? Yes and no. There's a lot of there's increasing interest in GSM security. There's a lot of people starting to get into it. It's becoming a lot more accessible with stuff like USRP. So there's a lot more people hacking on it. There's a lot more people looking at it, and I think just in general, the pressure from the InfoSec community and the bad PR that's been surrounding GSM recently will eventually force the MNOs to respond. In terms of whether or not they can, that's an entirely different issue. As far as I'm aware, there is only one network operator that's deployed A53 on GSM so far. A53 is normally a 3G algorithm, purely because nobody wants to be the first person to do it. So once the hacking community, kind of gathers some momentum, and we come together and as a community say, look, GSM is bad, we need to do something about it. I think that's going to lead into a general kind of gradual evolution into more secure GSM systems, and we'll probably see A53 being used for the foreseeable future. I don't expect them to come out with new ciphering functions, given that A53 has only been academically broken so far. I would expect lots of new A3A8 hash functions. I have every confidence that if someone were to reverse engineer maybe AT&T's A3A8 function, it would be broken, and that would force AT&T to upgrade. So yes, there's some circumstances in which an upgrade could be forced, but in general I see it as kind of a gradual evolution as awareness builds. Okay, I think I'm actually out of time, so I'm going to call it a day there. Thank you all for listening.